Quite the talent he is. Proper chatterbox yada. If you're keen, it'll be brilliant. Today, we're going to keep it simple. I'll bark out a basic command and you watch. Keen to know? He'll set your tail wagging. Does mine, hence why I'm backing him. Right then, Wookie here. Do take a seat, won't you? Give us your full attention while we listen to my pal, Yada.
All right. No live stream today, but we are going to broadcast anyway. Unfortunately, our technology isn't all working as we would like it to. But we are back at our Ocean studio, although this is going to be a little different as a program. We're going to return to the basics. And as part of the basics, we are in now what will be our fourth episode of Luminaries. It is from Maoreth, and it is something that God introduced as the first prophecy in the Torah. It's in chapter 1 of Bereshith, the first book of the Torah. And it is a prophecy whereby God is specifically telling us that he has two men, that he has chosen even before animals were conceived on this earth. In the third day of creation, he is, the fourth day of creation, he is explaining that there'll be two luminaries. From God's perspective, they're both great, although they are exceedingly different in the sense that one's older, one's younger, one's more influential than the other, both tremendously impactful individuals, but one is exceptional in this regard. And so these two individuals, the mayor of Gadol and of Catan, the greater and lesser luminaries, would, according to God, serve as signs, as volunteers fulfilling the Moedim. And the Moedim are the single most important dates on Yahweh's calendar, not only annually, but throughout the millennia. There's nothing even remotely akin to their value as we assess how God delivers salvation to his people. The first three Moedim were fulfilled as the prophecy indicates by the older and greater of the two luminaries, Dode. And in that regard, it was fulfilled in year 4000 Yah, which was consistent with this being revealed as a prophecy in the fourth day of creation. So with all of that shared with us, we really have a rather exceptional prophecy, with Dode having fulfilled as the greater luminary the first three of these Moedim, these annual meetings fulfilled by the restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. And then God speaks of also the Catan Mayor, the younger of the two, the less influential of the two. He would fulfill the next Moedim. In particular, we're talking about the fulfillment of Shabuah, which is upcoming, Teruah, 7 years from now, and that they would jointly work to fulfill the last two, which would be first on Kippurim and thereafter on Sukkah. So that's really a lot for God to have revealed here in the opening chapter of Bereshith Genesis, that these two luminaries would exist, that they would have such a influential impact on God's redemptive plan to restore his relationship with fallen man, and that they would do so over the course of the Moedim. That hand that you saw, obviously the the hand in there, that happens to be Rich, as he's trying to bring us back into the studio, so that we can actually see on our end what is being live streamed to you. It makes this program so much easier, more comfortable for the host. Wookie likes it too when we know what you're seeing. Otherwise, we have 4 cameras here, and each camera has multiple vantage points, and we really don't know what you're looking at when we do this without this supportive device. So we're glad to have it operating again. All right, so having already opened the floodgates, I think, and understanding pursuant to Yahweh's plans, his people, and pace. Now, here Yahweh saying that I got 2 guys, and these 2 guys are going to be exceedingly influential, and they're serving as the signs and exemplars of the very volunteers who are going to fulfill the 7 most important dates in human history: Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, Shavua, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. And recognizing that those are the dates that the benefits of the covenant are achieved, opening the door to life, removing the guilt of the covenant family, adopting us into that covenant as firstborn children, and then empowering and enriching us, coordinating the harvest and preparation for the extraordinary work that lies ahead on Teruah, doing so on Shavua, 7 years in advance of Yahweh's and Dod's, Father and Son's, God and Savior's homecoming on Kippurim, so that we can be properly prepared to aid the mortal remnant of Yisrael as they embark on the 1,000 years of our return to the garden on Sukkah. So that's what's at stake here. And when we finished that, we then, talked about several additional prophecies, those primarily in the Mizmor, in the Psalms, that also addressed the influence, going forward, of the sun and the moon in the lives of God's children. So here we are now, having processed that, and I want to take you to what I think is another of the really extraordinary prophetic portrayals pursuant not only to the sun and the moon, but specifically to the Gadol and the Katan, the older and younger, greater and lesser of the 2 luminaries. So, since God agreed not to talk directly to his people, and we know that at the beginning of the Exodus, at his people's request, they told him to shut up and go away, that they didn't want to hear from him or see him again. God has chosen throughout time men and sometimes women to speak for him. Today, he has deployed a choder who is a stem off the main branch. Choder is someone that God has imbued with his 7 spirits, such that he has the spirit of Yahweh, the spirit of Chakma, wisdom, the spirit of Bien, understanding, the spirit of Etzah, which is this tree that helps to frame the entire picture pursuant to the portrait that God has painted. The spirit of Gabor, which is courage and boldness, confidence and conviction. The spirit of Diath, telling us that the Choder is the tree of knowledge, because Diath is knowledge leading to understanding. And the spirit of Yare, respect for all things pursuant to Yahweh, who is a Nakri, God's observant foreigner, someone from a distant land and a distant time that is able to deduce through careful analysis and close examination, thoughtful consideration, what God wants his people to know and how they are to respond. He is a Bashar, therefore a human herald, serving both Yahweh and Yah's beloved son, Dod. His name is Yada, which means one who knows. And he is serving as the final Zeroah, which is the one who cultivates the harvest, all to deliver the instructions that you're listening to now. He is the man from Edom who saves many, the Adamah Parah, bloody red man of the earth, who is a productive bull. He is prominent throughout God's story, and he and his service to the Ram, who is the Son of God and our Savior, is made manifest in this next prophecy we're going to pursue. So, per God's preference, these two men are written about frequently because they are freely offered to benefit God's people. And you will find everything you could possibly want to know about them at yadayah.com. That website is developing just beautifully. So many new features even added today. So we know that Hosea was kind enough to provide the web address, something we deduced in our previous session. Now, this takes us to the preeminent event. God said through the prophet Jeremiah, "Behold, a time is coming," Yahweh reveals well in advance of it occurring, "when I will enter into and cut, karat, I will establish, with the house of Yisrael, the home of those who engage and endure with God, and with the family of Yehudah." This is the household of the beloved of Yah. "A restoring and renewing, repaired and affirmed covenant." 31:31 of Jeremiah. This is a really astonishing text. It is one that you would have thought that the frauds that created the Christian New Testament would have cited, because it's the only reference that can be twisted to create the impression of a new covenant. They didn't, ostensibly because of two reasons. One is it is introduced saying that it applies to Yisrael and Yehudah, and therefore it does not apply to a Goyim church. Therefore, it would be difficult for there to pilfer, but you know that the Twistians were exceedingly effective at taking things out of their context, so that normally would not have stopped them. But nonetheless, you can't claim this on behalf of Christianity, because the restoration of the covenant, the renewal, the Kadash of the covenant, is with the house of Yisrael and the house of Yehudah. And the beginning, they're distinct from one another because there was a separation between these two that turned out to be a bloody civil war. And then the house of Yisrael was hauled away into slavery by the Assyrians, leaving the house of Yehudah, and it was ransacked by the Assyrians, by the Babylonians, by the Greeks, by the Romans 3 times, and after that, on and on. And so at the beginning, God says, I want to restore this covenant. And part of that restoration is solving the fragmented family now between Yisrael and Yehudah, because the second time he will speak of them, he will drop the name Yehudah and just speak of Yisrael, because Yisrael is inclusive of Yehudah. Yahud was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, who is Yisrael. And the terms that are used here are, of course, definitive. Kadash means to renew, to restore, to repair, to affirm. And Bereth covenant is always singular. It's a family-oriented relationship. And to karat is to establish. It is to cut. And this is a prophetic declaration. So it would happen in the future. And so we know that it had to happen sometime after 700, 6 to 700 BCE. And now we know that it will happen here in 2033. So it's the best possible news, as I've shared previously, for Yisrael and Yehudim. Their estrangement from Yahweh will soon be resolved. But of course, it's devastating news for Christians. The covenant negotiated with Abraham and Sarah, affirmed with Yishak and Jacob, and then established through Dod, will be renewed and reaffirmed with their descendants, with Yisrael and Yehudim, not Gentiles or a church, which negates the entire premise of Christianity. So one verse that would have helped them so much in terms of justifying a new covenant destroys them, because rather than dishonor his promises to his people and transfer them to Goyim and a church, God is restoring his original covenant with his original people, Yisrael and Yehudim. This means that Yahweh will not renege on his promises to his people, that he will re-engage with his chosen people on the basis of the original covenant, as explained in Bereshith, Genesis of his Torah instructions. Therefore, we can rely upon the same 5 terms and conditions and the same 5 benefits that are presented throughout the book of Bereshith, the opening book of the Torah. And the first of these is to disassociate from all things Babel. And that includes national politics, religion, societal traditions, politics, and the family of man. Now, since Goyim and their church have been expressly excluded, and only Israelites and Yehudim are included in this renewal, Christians rip a misleading rendition of Lokaha Berith Asher Karat Eth Abhem out of this next statement, all to justify their New Testament. But that's a fool's folly. And even as it goes down replacement foolology lane, it leads nowhere. God said it will be somewhat different. Loka. It won't be exactly the same as the covenant, the Bereth, which to reveal the way to the benefits of the relationship, Asher, I entered into, cut, and established, Karat, with their fathers. Now, if you stopped right there, you'd say, hey, yeah, okay, we can have a new one. Well, that would be to take the sentence and stop it where God didn't stop it. Because he continues, on the day that I firmly took them by the hand and with overwhelming intent overpowered the situation. This is Shazak. It's Shazak Ane Bayad. I showed an intense resolve and was inflexible in my influence over them, even overpowering them due to the urgent need for them to prevail. Shazak, to bring them out. La Yatza, men. to draw them away from them being slaves in the realm of the crucibles of oppression, Eretz Mitzrayim. Now, what that says is that the difference between the way that he will approach the affirmation of the covenant in our future, 7 years from now, and the way that he reaffirmed the covenant with his people during the Exodus is that he was firm, he was resolute, he was overpowering, he was inflexible with them. He didn't stop to ask them if they wanted to leave Mitzrayim. He did not say, pretty please. He didn't say, we're going to go on a great journey and you're going to have the bestest time and we're going to be buds, BFFs forever. And let's just take a stroll down the yellow brick road and we'll end up in the land of Oz. That is not how it worked. They didn't want to leave. Even Moshe, early in the process, says, God, all you've done is made the situation worse. I want to leave now. I didn't want to do this in the first place and I want out now. This is not working out. And they didn't get 3 days past, still at Horeb, they turned religious. They didn't even want to get across the Gulf of Aqaba, the sea, before they said, let's go back. We don't want to be with you anymore. And then they get across on the other side, and the first thing they do is build a religious idol, a golden calf. They got so bad that 3 days out of Choreb, they turned on Moshe and were so belligerent to him, so antagonistic to God, that Moshe said, I want you to kill me, God. This is impossible. These people are impossible. So God literally took them out of Mitzrayim, the crucibles of human religious and political oppression, kicking and screaming. And he said, the thing that's going to be different, I'm not going to do that again. The reason I had to do it then is that they knew nothing about me and they were jerks. And I made a promise, and so I was doing it on the basis of the promise that I had made to Abraham. But going forward, I'm not going to do that again. You're going to come and be part of the covenant on your own free will, or not at all. That's the message. God's not making a distinction between the covenant he articulated with Abraham and its reaffirmation, but instead with the reaffirmation of the covenant as Yahweh was taking the children of Israel out of Mitzrayim, where he overpowered the situation by necessity. God then says, relationally, they themselves thwarted and broke, violating and nullifying my covenant. That's the reason he had to be so overpowering. Just because they violated the covenant, though, God couldn't just let it go. The reason he couldn't just let it go is that everything depended upon them as the chosen people getting into the promised land and allowing time and people to play out so that the promise that God established in the fourth day of creation, with the fulfillment of the Moedim occurring through the Gadol and Katan Meor, could occur on schedule. So he had to get them into the promised land. He had to have the plan play out. And so it's true that Israel has consistently thwarted, broken, violated, and nullified God's covenant. And here it is, God speaking in first person, and he calls it my covenant. So the covenant, the Bereth, belongs to Yahweh. It's Yahweh's family. There is no mention of Yahweh's family in the Christian New Testament, or in the Talmud for that matter, meaning that they're not a reaffirmation of this covenant. Then God says, so they nullified it, my covenant, although I was and am a Baal, a husband, regarding them. Covenant is a marriage vow. God's not saying that he was a Baal husband to them in the sense that he consummated a relationship with Israel from a sexual perspective, obviously. He's using Baal as a metaphor, husband as a metaphor, as the husband, as the provider, if you will, the protector of the covenant family. So he says, while they broke my covenant, I am and have been a husband regarding them. Yahweh reveals through this prophet. Again, you can't steal it for Christianity. It's got Yahweh's name in it because Yahweh isn't your God. So this is a exceedingly powerful and precisely framed pronouncement. So it's important that we correctly contemplate its conclusions. First, this Bereth family relationship has not been reestablished with the Israelites or Yehudim, which means this promise has not yet been fulfilled. Therefore, there's no justification for a new covenant, much less a New Testament. And it's obvious, and it states so emphatically going forward, that this prophecy is depicting a future event, one that will materialize between Teruah and Sukkah and focus on Kippurim in year 6000 Yah, the 120th Yobel year in 2033. So in an act of desperation, as an attempt to sweep this issue, undermining the very foundation of the Christian religion under the carpet, the authors of the New Testament had the mythical Jesus equate his blood to wine and his body to bread to infer an unspoken and wholly ambiguous association with Pesach and matzah that they still wanted to deny and never would mention. And this is only because without this connection, there is no justification for the counterfeit's death or any correlation with the multitude of prophecies pertaining to their fulfillment. And since this did not resolve the explicit references to Dod being the one who would fulfill the Moedim as the Gadol Meor, Yahweh, Yisrael, and Jews, replacement foolology, we're all through replacement foolology, we're all miscast and became Jesus for Dod, the Lord for Yahweh, Yehudim for the church, and Yisrael for Christians. But there was no Jesus. Dod fulfilled Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children per his own prophetic pronouncements. We're instructed never to drink blood, and the lamb's blood goes on the door frame as a sign, not in one's mouth. Moreover, bread is unyeasted and not broken. And then, of course, prophecies like this one addressing Yahweh's affinity for Yisrael and Yehudim in our future precluded the possibility that church or Christians replacing God's chosen people. Not then, not now, not ever. Next, the reunification of Yisrael and Yehudim with Yahweh through an affirmation of the Bereth covenant speaks of a different 3 days in time. While the doorway to life was opened and the offer to remove our guilt was made and our adoption into God's family was facilitated by Dod during his fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, all at the onset of the 80th Yobel year in 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, it did not bring Israelites or Yehudim back together, nor did it reconcile their relationship with Yahweh. In fact, based upon the Jewish religious reaction to what the Messiah accomplished, it drove God and his people much further apart. And so it would be over the next 2,000 years. Jews need to come home, to embrace Yahweh, to accept his covenant, to attend his mikveh, to observe his Torah, and to cherish his beloved. Then they can participate in the family reunion, foretold here in Yirmiyah 31. Yirmiyah 31 is talking about the fulfillment of Chag Sukkah, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah in year 4000 Yah. And this will not even be fulfilled during Shabuah, because it's a harvest at the commencement of the time of Yisrael's troubles. It's still 7 years before the reaffirmation of the covenant. If the covenant was affirmed at this time, if it was restored at this time, then there wouldn't be the time of trouble. So we're still 7 years away from this date as we approach the 22nd of May, 2026, when the time of troubles begins, and the following year, June 11th of 2027, when the harvest is incurred. The days being referenced here pertain to the olive harvest on Teruah at the conclusion of year 6000 Yah, 2033. And they're followed by the restoration of and the purging of the returning remnant of Israelites and Yehudim in Jerusalem on Teruah, in anticipation of Dod's return with Yahweh on Kippurim. Now, this will lead to a Sukkah celebration when the remnant is allowed back into the garden. Therefore, Yahweh is speaking about what will occur on the Shabbat of Teruah trumpets in 2033, September 23rd and 24th. Yom Kippurim, the Day of Reconciliation, beginning at sunset, 6:22 p.m., October 2nd, 2033. And then our return to Eden on the Shabbat of October 7th in year 6000 Yah. It is then at the conclusion of the 120th Yobel that the Bereth covenant family will be renewed and reaffirmed with Yisrael and Yehudim. Now, it's also important to note that Yahweh was not comparing the ultimate restoration of his family with the inception of the Bereth narrative as negotiated with Abraham, culminating in 1968 BCE, year 2000 Yah, nor even to its confirmation on Mount Moriah that year as a harbinger of Passover. The 5 conditions articulated by Yahweh and accepted by Abraham still apply, as do the 5 benefits enabled by Dod's fulfillment of the spring mikveh. So the restoration and renewal of the covenant is being explicitly compared and contrasted to what occurred during the Yatzah, this exodus from Mitzrayim, the time of trouble and the crucibles of religious and political oppression, and the subsequent presentation of the Torah's guidance, which began in 1447 BCE. Yahweh is distinguishing between what he did through Moshe and what he will do with Yada to free his people from the presence of the rabbis who have sought to control them. Moshe delineated God's Torah instructions. Yada has explained them. Now, this distinction means that the renewal of the covenant in year 6000 Yah, 7 years from now, coinciding with Yada's sacrifice as the Adam of Parah, that it differs from how Yahweh interacted with the children of Israel alongside Moshe 3,480 years prior to the fulfillment of this prophecy. Specifically, Yahweh was Shazak, in his own words, overpowering and inflexible. Bayom, on that day, because the Israelites were so badly indoctrinated and abused by the most overtly political and religious regime on earth, that they were unaware of who God is, what he's offering, what he expects in return. They were recalcitrant because they had no access to a text teaching them otherwise. Therefore, God dragged them from slavery and servitude. He dragged them away from being dehumanized and abused. And they weren't the least bit happy about it. I mean, God did everything he possibly could to try to get them from here to there, and it wasn't easy. They were obnoxious. In fact, the Hebrews became so accustomed to being demeaned that they were trauma bonded, more comfortable with being subjugated than being free. You know, it's a psychosis that haunts Jews even to this day. They're Stockholmed and have been, and it's very difficult to break them free of that. An additional point that God is trying to make is that the renewal of his covenant with Yehudim and Israelites will not occur the way it did 3,480 years prior to this. The exodus from Babel, the commingling of religion and politics associated with Babylon and the Bible, Babel, during the Teruah olive harvest and Kippurim homecoming, will be wholly dissimilar to the exodus from Mitzrayim, and that the irascible and embittered malcontents will all be left behind. There won't be 600,000. I'd be surprised if there were 6,000. No one will be dragged into the covenant. No one is going to be deprived of their free will. It's going to be based upon each individual decision to accept the conditions or reject them. A fifth point that Yahweh was making is that the chosen people did not choose God. They thwarted, broke, and violated, nullified, frustrated, and foiled the Bereth covenant, and they still are. So God boldly announced that he had been their Baal, their husband. He had done everything he could to establish himself as their protector and their benefactor, as their provider, as one who loved them as a husband loves his wife, as the head of a family. He had been their Baal, but they had rejected him in that role. So clearly God saw the covenant as a marriage, and it was one that was fracturing, had fractured. So this speaks to why he wrote the letter of divorce to Israel and Hosea, telling his former wife, if you will, symbolically anyway, that she had cheated on him by being religious. This explains why the groom in Numbers 5 of the adulterous woman wants his family back. He wants Israel back. After, of course, Yada's sacrifice purges them of their guilt on Dod's behalf. Now, 6, the conclusion of the previous prophecy positions Baal favorably as a husband. And like so many words and titles in Hebrew, Baal's intent was co-opted and twisted by Satan, such that something that we should aspire to and respect has been sullied by the foolish. Now, while the reason should be obvious, because Jews have long been oblivious, Yahweh seeks to enlighten them, recognizing that the former Hebrew slaves years ago could neither read nor write. And since they had no Torah or Nabiim, prophets, to recite, God grabbed them by the hand and he lifted them out of harm's way. A loving father would do that. You know, if a 2-year-old is having a great time wallowing in um, a melted ice cream shop where you can lay on the floor and slather all the ice cream you want to in your mouth, and he's having or she's having just a grand time. As a parent, you're not going to say, that's really not good for you. I think it's time that we get you all cleaned up, and I'd appreciate if you could stand up now and choose to leave all that ice cream and the candy behind, and come home with me now. It's your free will and all. I'll leave you here if that's what you'd prefer. No, as a parent, you're going to pick them up by the hand and you're going to pull them out of harm's way and going to take them home. That's what God did. I've now invested the past quarter century preparing these translations for Yehudim to explain how what happened in the past relates to what will occur in the future. They're all available at yadayah.com for your edification. And now you have the opportunity to do what they couldn't do. You can read it, accept it, or ignore it, even reject it. But you're going to live with the consequence. Now, as Yahweh has affirmed, almost immediately after letting go of their hands during the Yatzah Exodus, the children of Israel rebelled. They spit and kicked sand in their Savior's face. Those 40 years were horrific right from the onset. And Jews really haven't gotten any better with time. With rare exceptions that faded to none over the course of millennia, Yisrael, para, continued to break and nullify Yahweh's bereth. And so as we approach the restoration of the family, it is incumbent upon the Jews seeking reconciliation to now initiate the process by acknowledging Yahweh, by accepting the conditions of the covenant as depicted in the Torah, while celebrating the Mikra as God intended them. And they should become familiar with Dode's role in enabling them. If you're unaware of these things, that's why the 35 volumes at yadayah.com are all available free in their entirety. The name Yahweh says it all. Now be forewarned, you will not prevail should you remain influenced by religion or politics or remain reluctant, unaware, or uncertain. That is the message being conveyed in this prophecy. God actually expects a fair amount from us. And if we can't measure up, he is not going to empower and enrich us to the extent necessary for us to leave this planet and go from 3 to 7 dimensions. So let it be known. The Talmud is not the Torah. The New Testament is not an affirmation of the covenant. So God says, for this reason, this now is the covenant, which to enjoy the benefits of the relationship, I will cut with the house of Yisrael. After that, without hesitation, in the end, prophetically declares Yahweh, I will provide placing my Torah, my guidance and teaching within them, and integrated into their ability to make decisions. I will write it. I will be their God, and they will be my family. Powerful. If you are among those who are going to be part of the affirmation of the covenant, then you need to know that the only way that will occur is for you to become Torah observant. God is not going to force you to accept his Torah. You're going to do so willingly or not at all. But he is going to do something that he could not do heretofore. God was not in the position where he could write his Torah inside of anyone prior to this point. And that's because you have to make the choice to accept God's teaching or reject it. And if God incorporated it into your very life, if he wrote it inside of you, then you would have no way to reject it or reject the covenant. And God doesn't want that to happen. He's not looking for a way to keep you from you rejecting or you accepting his Torah. He wants to make certain that you are free to reject it. In fact, he wants most people to reject it. He's not trying to be all-inclusive. Collective man is bad man. Individual man, well, some can be good, although that's rare. So this is an extraordinary thing. It completely negates Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, because God is writing his Torah inside of his people in the end. It means he's had no purpose whatsoever, no association with, no affinity for the New Testament, the Talmud, or the Quran. And you can read these words. They're clear. Yirmiyah 31:33. And integrated into their ability to make decisions. I will write it, and I will be their God, and they will be my family. And preceding that, he said that this is the covenant, which to enjoy the benefits of the relationship that I will establish with the house of Israel. After that, without hesitation in the end, prophetically declares Yahweh, I'm going to provide, placing my Torah, my guidance, and my teaching within them. Ba'kareb hem. No room for any religion under that basis. You'll either accept God's guidance or be excluded from him. Now, in the first statement, the message was directed to Israelites and Yehudim, as I mentioned, and as we have progressed, the audience was reaffirmed when God spoke of your fathers being the ones who were brought out of Mitzrayim. That would be the Exodus of the children of Israel. Then the identity of those slated for restoration is refined as Yisrael, because collectively they have now been reconciled with Yehudim, making Yisrael the overall umbrella. Therefore, the preeminent pronouncement required by Christians to justify their New Testament clearly does not apply to them and negates their New Testament. By the same token, with the incorporation of the Torah into the lives of God's children, the Talmud toters are also excluded. In fact, so are those who are political and religious, because the stated intent is to become the children of the covenant and Yahweh's family, where there are no political parties or religious sects, and where the Torah is overtly anti-religious and apolitical. So Yahweh has also affirmed that this prophecy applies to Akar, the last days, and not to the creation of a church 2,000 years ago, or rabbinical Judaism 1,900 years ago, nor even to the return of Jews to Israel 80 years ago. The end of a world awash in religion and politics, and the beginning of one cleansed of such corruptions, well, it occurs in the fall of 2033, year 6,000, yeah. The restoration of the covenant is not just with Israel. It includes the incorporation of Yahweh's Torah guidance into the lives of his people. Pretty extraordinary. This is radically different than anything God has done previously, because it means that the Torah can no longer be rejected, annulled, amended, or abridged. And yet, since free will still persist, preferring the Talmud or New Testament will exclude a person from inclusion of the Torah. And it means that by accepting Yahweh's Torah, a person is agreeing to have their choices influenced by God's guidance. That is why it is being written on our leb hearts and minds and integrated into our decision-making process while influencing our inclinations and disposition. Leb in this period and in ancient languages like Hebrew was the seat of judgment, not emotions. The point of all of this is to increase and enhance the size and quality of Yahweh's family. Mostly the quality. And this means that it's the Torah which makes the covenant possible. Should you be curious as to why Yahweh will be able to integrate his Torah guidance and teaching into the lives of his covenant family at this juncture, but could not do so previously? The answer, of course, is, as I have mentioned, free will. Had God sought to place his Torah inside the Israelites 3,500 years ago, even 4,000 years ago, it would have been against the will of those individuals. And it would have precluded anyone from rejecting God, which is incompatible with a loving relationship and contrary to what God's trying to achieve. He regretted conceiving mankind when one became many, because many are almost universally bad. Now that every recipient has arrived of their own discretion and have chosen to be directed by the Torah, it's the perfect adjunct to guide us back to the garden and through the expansive realm of space-time thereafter, as God emancipates us into the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh dimensions. And please don't miss the fact that even now, it is the Torah that is being written inside of us. This is a frontal assault in opposition to the absurd rabbinical argument in favor of an oral Torah, a Babylonian Talmud. Further to this point, since Yisrael's long-anticipated return to Yahweh culminates with the incorporation of Yahweh's written Torah, there's no viability to a New Testament. God's message has not changed. His people have. And they will need to change again to be part of the remnant celebrating this day. And as a result of the restoration and the integration that Yahweh intends, there will be a marvelous transformation, the complete elimination of religious, political, and conspiratorial guilt, as well as jargon. We will all yada Yahweh. God says they will not teach any longer as an individual man to his fellow countryman or companion, nor as an individual person to his brother. To approach, say, choose of your own accord to yada Yahweh. Teaching is not going to be person to person. It's going to come from Yada Yahweh. The books of the Yada Yahweh series, the Yahweh blog, the new home for Yahweh's name, the home for the covenant family, YadaYahweh.com, YadaYah.com. To approach, to draw near, declare, choose of your own free will to Yada Yahweh. Decide to acknowledge and recognize Yahweh through Yada Yahweh, demonstrating the desire to become familiar with and to understand Yahweh, respecting and selecting Yahweh. Written in the call, genuine stem, imperfect mood, which is a expression of second person volition, and in the second person masculine plural. That is the ultimate endorsement. When I come across and am confident saying that What I'm sharing with you is for your edification, and it's essential for you to establish a relationship with Yahweh and be part of his family. I say it because God has said it. Those books, Yada Yahweh, were written over 25 years, 7 days a week, 12, sometimes 14 hours a day. There is nothing like them now, nor has there ever been anything like them. They're the most comprehensive, most accurate, most insightful presentations of the Word of God ever written. You can benefit from them or you can ignore them. But if your goal is to be part of the covenant family, God's advice is for you to choose to Yada Yahweh. For indeed, every one of them at that time, they will know me. They will be like Yada with me. All of them, without exception, they will actually and continually be aware and acknowledge me. As a result of their katan. I told you we were going to celebrate the role of the Gadol and Katan Mayor, even the son of the moon, as we proceeded with this profoundly important prophecy about the reaffirmation of the covenant through the integration of the Torah. And indeed, we came to God saying, if you want to approach, choose to Yada Yahweh. And then he says, for indeed, every one of them will know me, being like Yada with me, as a result of their katan. La min katan hem. Approaching is few in number, with the one having lower status, who is younger chronologically, and yet correctly assesses the information and easily comprehends. You want to know how I was able to deduce that? Well, consider Shemoth, Exodus 18:22. The Katan is the younger, less significant, and influential one who is readily determined and who should easily be known based upon God's prophecies regarding him. And the Katan, well, he is acting as the ad, the restoring witness to the eternal testimony of their Gadol him, of their more esteemed and older one, who was distinguished for having been raised to promote empowerment to an enormous magnitude, their most favored, important, and highest ranking one, for having grown up to become great, prophetically reveals in advance of it occurring Yahweh. Katan Gadol. It's a reaffirmation, not only of the covenant, but how you get from here to there, and how the integration of the Torah is made possible by Yada Yahweh and the witness of the Katan. It's the one that was predicted in the fourth day of creation. And his witness will be to bring your attention to the Gadol, who is Dod, our Savior, our Messiah, our King, as he returns as Elyon, the influence of Almighty God on Kippurim. Well, that is what Yahweh says, should you choose to trust him. Yirmiyah Yah lifts up Jeremiah 31:34. If you had to have affirmation that the Gadol and Katan Maoreth, the greater and lesser luminaries, who were foretold to be signs and examples, exemplary of the fulfillment of the 7 restoring witnesses to the eternal testimony. God's specific promise of the Mikre through the Moedim. Pesach, Matzah, Bakorim, Shavua, Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukkah. If you hadn't made the connection between that and the Torah, between that and the restoration of the covenant, between that and the witness provided by Yada Yahweh, God has filled in all of the necessary clues for you, hasn't he? He has made understanding exceedingly easy for the open-minded. Now, when set into the midst of what is perhaps the single most declarative statement regarding the restoration of the covenant with Yisrael in year 6000 Yah, this prophetic pronouncement becomes the preeminent summation of Yahweh's plans and the ultimate affirmation of God's chosen implements. The Maoreth, the Gadol Maor is king, and the Katan Maor is teacher. One is older than the other, and I don't know if the answer there is by 16 years or 600 years, depending on whether one Chinook is the same as the other. But regardless, I can tell you that just as the words suggest, the Katan is younger than the Gadol, because Dod is Adam and Yada is Chinook. This assessment will be the ongoing condition experienced by all who are fortunate enough to be among the surviving remnant of the chosen people. Take it to heart. There will be no religious alternatives, no political infighting, no spurious claims of authority, no ongoing prolonged disagreements. There will be no sects, no cults, no parties, no false prophets. Well, there'll be parties, but not political ones. No misleading teachers and no contrary interpretations or antagonism. There won't even be competitive teachers. One God by one name, Yahweh. One source of guidance, the Torah. One prescription for living, Yada Yahweh. One king, the Gadol Maor. One teacher, the Katan Maor. One people, Yisrael. This result will have been delivered by a single witness in collaboration with God, who has been established to restore Yahweh's name, to reinforce the preeminence of his Torah, to correctly convey the inscribed conditions of the covenant, to reestablish respect for our king, and to reunite Yisrael at the end of a horrid time of trouble. And he, as the Katan Maor, will do so through the Moedim, his father, brother, co-worker, beneficiary of the Gadol Maor. True to his word, and to his nature. Yahweh will establish all of this through these chosen implements. He is now a proud father and a delighted God. He has been proven right. We humans were worth the effort. We were capable of being observant, responsive, and reliable. Jews will no longer teach Jews because they will be listening to Yada. The Talmud will no longer exist because Yada Yahweh will serve as the means to comprehend and apply the Torah's guidance. Hashem will be abandoned for the Shem of our God, Yahweh, and all will Yada Yahweh. This is the resolution for the 3 instructions Yahweh carved on the first tablet. Yahweh will have liberated his people from all forms of oppression and from false gods. There will be no trace of religion, and fathers will no longer corrupt their sons with false teaching. Thousands will receive Yahweh's mercy and bank and bask in his love, all by accepting his prescriptions for living. And as a result of his Torah and of Yada Yahweh explaining it, making it pertinent in the lives of God's people, Yahweh's name will no longer be hidden, erased, forgotten, or disparaged. Excuse me. Over the past year, I have transitioned in my approach and thinking. I no longer see the library composing Yada Yahweh at yadayah.com or the Yahweh vlog as a means to recruit covenant members. There is no longer enough time for anyone new to learn what must be known and then mature and grow into effective and responsible children of the covenant to the extent that they can prove themselves trustworthy to God. Further, there isn't a suitable forum to share God's message because the social media platforms have become havens for the most troubling expressions of religion, politics, conspiracy, militancy, and indoctrination, subjugation, control, and rampant anti-Semitism. So I have determined and shared that our purpose at this point in time is to build the worldwide home of Yahweh's name, his covenant family's home, and the library for Yada Yahweh, all at yadayahweh.com. Doing so to lead Israelites and Goyim through the time of trouble and into the millennial celebration of Sukkah, where it becomes the library for the remnant of Israel, the library of Sukkah. And obviously, Yahweh concurs. In fact, he was the one who conceived the idea in the first place. Up to this point, the problem with Jews has been that the wrong people have been teaching the wrong material. The yeshiva is case in point. Rabbis feed the Haredi out of their Talmud and train them to be useless and antagonistic parasites, irritating Yahweh. Therefore, having learned nothing of value over the past 3,500 years, the time of Jews teaching Jews is kaput. Those who have been afforded the opportunity to approach God at this time, and especially those gathered by Yahweh on Teruah for Kippurim in advance of Sukkah, will universally choose to accept Yada Yahweh. This is now the charter for the returning remnant of Israel. Israel doesn't have a constitution, but I can tell you the remnant will. A time is soon to come, just 7 years from this pronouncement, when everyone who survives will come to recognize, acknowledge, and appreciate Yahweh. There will be no exceptions. in 4 pronouncements: Yirmiah, Jeremiah, 31, 31, 32, 33, and 34. Yahweh has disclosed where we are headed, how we're going to get there, and what will transpire once we are as one. He has brought us full circle back to the garden with the Gadol Meor as the tree of lives and the Katan Meor as the tree of knowledge. The Choder will have served his purpose. The king will be restored to prominence. Yahweh is smiling. And a particularly relevant disclosure. This will be as a result of the Katan serving as a restoring witness to the Gadol. This is because Yahweh wants to bring some humans back to where we began in the midst of his creation account. Therefore, even prior to his narrative on the garden, Yahweh explained what he was going to achieve through his Katan Meor and Gadol Meor. And so now, upon our return to the garden, we find them touting Yada Yahweh on behalf of the returnees. This is God's plan. It will not change. So now that you know what is going to happen, with whom, when, and why it will occur, well, I trust that you will be among the celebrants. I look forward to seeing you on Shabuah, or at least thereafter, en route to Teruah and at the homecoming of Kippurim. Well, this then brings us to the reference to the sun and the moon. And I suspect that you're going to be surprised by what Yahweh has to say about them. I will conclude this program as we can see the sun is now below the horizon. I look to the west, the sky has turned orange. It's a beautiful evening above the Caribbean Sea. And now Yahweh says, I have provided the brilliance of the sun to approach the light in the day, sharing the engraved inscriptions of the conditions to be cut into the relationship by the moon and the heavenly powers to approach the light, even in the night. I am stirring up and bringing repose by the sea, such that his waves roar while abundantly enriching the multitude. Yahweh, of the vast array of spiritual implements, is his name. And so as we ponder the implications of this beautiful message before a glowing orange sky to our west, I want you to think about what God had to say. That it's about the Gadol and the Katan Meor, the greater and lesser luminaries. Metaphorically, the sun and the moon, and how Yahweh has provided them, with the sun being particularly brilliant, all to approach the light of his presence during the day. While it is the moon that shares the engraved prescriptions of the conditions to be cut into the relationship on behalf of the heavenly powers, so you can approach the light, even during the darkest hours. God is stirring up, and he's also bringing repose. He is disturbing and pacifying, agitating and rousing, all by the sea, which is symbolic of the man from the sea, the man from Edom, so that his waves roar while abundantly enriching the multitude. As we bring you this program, as the moon is about to rise and the sun has just set over a roaring sea, and the warmth of a beautiful evening sky. All so that we can celebrate the name of our God, Yahweh, and the contributions of his beloved Son, Dod, so that we, through the guidance of the Torah, can be among those who are children of the covenant. Thank you for listening this evening. Good night.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch y'all on our next podcast.